Hi, it's Chris Titley, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Jennie Sager, CEO of the WNBL. Jennie, thank you so much for being part of this series.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Jennie, we're here on the 27th of March 2025, an exciting time for the WNBL, I believe, with a little bit happening next week. But do you want to talk about how your 2025 has started so far?
My 2025 has started with a bang because my first official day here at the WNBL was January 2nd. It was quite funny because it was just me and two other people in the office. So, it wasn't like I didn't come in and everyone was here.
There wasn't a standing ovation or a ticker tape parade?
I think the two other people were like, wait, who are you? But no, so it's absolutely started with me diving straight in on the second day of the year, really the first day by Australian standards, I think. And it has not slowed down since then. It's been absolutely full speed ahead and really, really exciting times.
And Jennie, did you sort of sit down and they do the interview for the job and they say, what's your first 100 days look like?
As in, like, what have my first 100 days looked like, or did they ask me that?
A and B.
Yes, so they did ask me that, and I think my first 100 days has largely reflected what I said, which would be lots of listening and learning. I think, the WNBL has an incredible 45-year history, and so coming in and even some of the simple things, like I spent my first 100 days visiting every club at a home game, because that was really important to me to not only just meet the people that are making that happen in all of those locations every week of the season, but also seeing what the experience is like at a home game, what the crowd is like, what the vibe is. And so that was absolutely essential. And so I think that's a good example of kind of that listening and observing and just soaking it all in, and also meeting everybody and listening and learning and asking lots of questions. And then from there, I think you use that 100 days to kind of start building out, okay, what is your strategy going to look like for the first year and long term as well?
I'm just thinking out aloud with the maths. It must be close or just past 100 days?
It is very close. Your math is good. So coming up in next week, actually.
Next week, there you go. Now, basketball in Australia, the last couple of years, probably 5 or 6 years at a grassroots level, participation levels have exploded. My son plays it. There's a huge following in the NBA. There's a huge following in the NBL. The WNBA's got a huge following, and you've taken on this role as the CEO of the WNBL. How are we going to get the WNBL going for the next decade or so?
Yeah, it's so exciting, and you're completely right. I mean, the global momentum around basketball, and particularly women's basketball right now, is absolutely undeniable. Like, you've got players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese who have everybody talking women's basketball right now, and the records that are being set around women's basketball globally are just mind-blowing. I mean, if you look at the NCAA finals, for example, like 19.8 viewers, 19.8 million viewers on the women's final, about 14.5 million on the men's final. So you just are starting to see women's basketball just absolutely explode and kind of get bigger even than men's basketball in a lot of areas, which is super exciting. And you're right, where the participation numbers in Australia are bigger than they've ever been before. And that is in every state and territory. There's not enough venues in every state and territory to actually support the amount of kids that want to play basketball. So every state and territory is turning away thousands of kids every year in Australia. And so that's important that we find a way to support that as well. But for the WNBL, what it means is that we have an opportunity to just build this league and take it to new levels along with the athletes and the clubs than it's ever been at before. Again, like leaning on that amazing 45-year history and all of the achievements that come along with that. And I think how you do that is absolutely, like, marketing is going to play a really big part in that. There's a lot of people in Australia that don't understand that the Opals come from the WNBL. Like, we have Olympians on every single team. When we look ahead to LA and Brisbane, that we are the league that's going to provide those Opals. And, again, there's that incredible history around how well we've done at the Olympic level. And so there's an education just in general around the level of skill, the players, the teams, and the league itself. And again, building that emotional connection. So how do you educate people about, like, well, who is that player on and off the court, so that they can feel connected to them and want to keep coming back and seeing them play? So that marketing and storytelling is really important. Obviously, we need commercial sponsors and broadcast partners to come along this journey with us and support women's sport and support women's basketball. And so that's really essential too.
Yeah, I think the idea of knowing the players, following the players' progress as you get a little bit older, as a teenager, you're probably on social media, you can follow these players as well and sort of get a glimpse into themselves. I know the AFL, as a parent of 3 kids, has done it really well with like the trading cards and the cricket, etc., where you get a pack of cards and, you know, half the pack would be men and half the pack would be women. You start to know the names, you start to go to the games, you start to get encouragement, posters on the wall, people are familiar. I remember doing a podcast and one of my sons was saying, I think it was Elise Villani, the cricketer, and they're like, "Oh, Elise Villani, I've got a card of hers. Oh, that's awesome, Dad." You know, so I think it's, you know, I think basketball trading cards in the 90s were huge, but not just saying that's the answer, but getting that understanding of knowing the players' numbers and knowing the teams. You know, in regards to grassroots participation, are you seeing the depth of talent in Australian basketball continue to rise? And hopefully, you know, the WNBA is something and the NBA is something, but also getting players go back and forth and continuing to have, you know, Australia as a place to really want to play basketball?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those pathways have just dramatically improved, and the opportunities now for players are just bigger than they've ever been before. And the relationship between the WNBA and the WNBL is fantastic. And our seasons are purposely planned opposite from each other so that we can provide the WNBA with players from the WNBL. And Australia is actually the country that provides the most players to the WNBA outside of America. And then vice versa, the WNBA provides players to our league every year as well. And so that relationship is absolutely fantastic. I think they're a great partner, and the opportunities that it presents for our athletes here in Australia are great because they can play here in our season and then they can play in America in the off season. But I think, again, the development pathways at the community level are just growing every single year, and those opportunities are growing every year as well.
You did mention that it's one of us, I think it is the Australia's oldest league from a women's point of view. Looking at the history of the league, and some of the learnings are good. Obviously, a lot of learnings, a lot of data points, etc., that potentially maybe not way back in the day, but certainly more recently, some data points to say what's working and what's not. And how much of the history you're looking at to make, you know, the next 45 years great?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And a great example of that is one of the first people that we hired here at this new WNBL is Lauren Jackson, right? Like, she has that personal athlete perspective and also like a huge history. She is one of the players that played for the longest amount of time in the league. And so having someone like her on board as a staff member and a special advisor is really fantastic. And just, you know, even if it's in the simple form of running things by her and going, hey, like, is this actually going to make a difference? You know, and she absolutely came in the door with some ideas too of like, hey, here are some things that we could never really get off the ground because there wasn't enough investment in resourcing. And now we have an opportunity to fix it. So it is really important to look back at that history and go, okay, there's a lot of things that helped get it to where it is today, but then what else can we kind of double down on now that maybe the investment and the resourcing wasn't there before? And to give you an example of that, that's like athlete development and transition. So, you know, making sure that these athletes get some business skills and mentorship and what that looks like so that when they're actually on the other side of their career and ready to leave the league, they're set up well to do that. But then also, you know, player welfare, athlete welfare, like looking at the medical and health and wellness around it as well. And like, how can we build off of that? So, and then, you know, you look at things like the referee program and what does that look like? So I think that's a long-winded way of saying like we're looking at everything and then trying to figure out where we can make the most impact, not just in the first year, but beyond that as well.
And Jennie, when people see your face and hear your voice as the new CEO of the WNBL, they might say, oh, who's Jennie? I want to know a little bit more about Jennie. Can you give the listeners out there a little bit of a background about your career and what led you to this job?
Sure. Well, I played basketball my whole life, I guess, is one of the first things to point out. So still heavily involved in sports, both as a player and now with my own kids, you know, at the community level with my children as well. But sports has always played a huge part in my life. professionally, never quite got to the Lauren Jackson level, but
Well, I don't think too many people have, to be honest, including myself.
Yeah, exactly. But no, professionally, I started my career in broadcast television, and so had a very long, lengthy career as an executive producer, where I was creating shows, writing, developing shows for all the major networks in the US and here in Australia. And really, at heart, that was about taking stories that the public would have otherwise not known or heard of, and like bringing them to life, right? So I did a lot of work across like documentaries and observational series and things like that. And really, that's what you're doing. Like, again, you're building that emotional connection with people's stories and journeys that people otherwise wouldn't know. And from there, then social media, was kind of starting to take off about 13 years ago. And so it was really changing the landscape of obviously broadcast television. Like, streaming platforms were starting to take off, social media was taking off, and TV, in its sense, was kind of becoming a bit of a dinosaur. And I just went like, I need to get my head around the social media space. And at the time, I was still living in New York City, where I'm from, but I had decided to come to Australia, and Twitter was starting an office in Australia. And so I helped get Twitter off the ground here. And then that grew into eventually looking after teams in 12 different countries through Asia Pacific, where I moved into a regional role. But there's a lot of, even though it was a global company, like it was functioning like a startup in this part of the world, right? So you have to build a team from scratch again, which I did a lot of times in major productions in the US, but you're like hiring an entire team. You're building the entire business strategy. You're scaling it. You're growing it. Like you've got to be able to take a brand that has pretty low brand recognition and sentiment and grow that through an entire region, right? So it's like being in a startup again. And then similarly, I went from there to another tech company where it's the same thing, like starting the business in Australia, then scaling that, and then eventually taking over 12 different countries for that company, right? And so the WNBL fits in perfectly, where it's this combination of my sports experience and my passion for sport, but essentially what our job is over the next few years is to scale and grow the business being women's basketball in Australia, right? And so there's a direct correlation there. And I think one of the figures that I love the most is that 95% of female executives played sport at an elite level. And that is like, it's so awesome, right? Because what does it teach you? It teaches you like determination, grit, teamwork, like hard work, like all of those things, professionalism that you need to be successful in business. And that's, to go back to the question you asked before, it's like, well, why do we want to complete the circle with athlete transition? Because these athletes have skills that can directly translate into the business world.
And also, I think from a point of view that being a professional athlete is finite, broadly speaking. Yeah. I mean, you can be... you can play into your 40s, look at LeBron and a few different things like that, and examples in cricket and whatnot. But after that, the sponsorship dries up and a few things, and you have to readjust your self-career. And part of the reason why I started Scoreboard, the podcast, was to get stories about how people are thinking about life after sport. Life during sport is obviously very, very busy, and you need to maximize your brand value during your athlete's career. But then in post that, to have something, to have an interest, to have a hobby, to do something. And I think, from a point of view as a league, you've got teams to manage as well. How are you thinking about the league as a whole, as opposed to sort of like boosting up or at least accelerating some teams to kind of be on an even keel with each other?
Yeah, I mean, one can't succeed without the other. Like, the league is nothing without clubs and athletes, and the clubs and athletes need the league to succeed as well. And so it absolutely has to be a collaboration. We have to join arms and, function like we're one team. And so that is really important to the success of women's basketball in Australia. And again, why it was important for me to spend those first 60 days traveling around and meeting all the clubs and some of the players and seeing them on their home turf, and to really understand the success that they've had locally, the work that's gone into it, but also the challenges that they have locally. And then that helps us figure out how we can help them, because again, we need each other to kind of take this to the new levels that we want to go to.
Yep, and in Australia, basketball was, a decade ago, probably on the nose. You saw the league getting into a little bit of trouble. We saw teams withdrawing, even here in Brisbane. We didn't have the Bullets for a bit, and we still don't have a WNBL team, which I'll get onto shortly. But broadly speaking, Larry Kesselman came in and took the league to where it is now in terms of the popularity and the sellout games, etc. You've got a new owner as the WNBL group. Do you want to talk about the Robin Denholm and the family group that are taking over, and how important that is in terms of the balance sheet and the profit of the organisation moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to have two successful and absolutely self-made and a ton of trust in what they're capable of doing owners into the WNBL, and both Robin and Larry, is absolutely an incredible opportunity. They both have a very proven track record of growing, starting, scaling businesses, and doing so again in a capacity where they, were self-made from the get-go. And so I think that in itself speaks to the impact that we have the opportunity to make with the WNBL. I have been, I think, so just, I don't know if surprised is the word, but just blown away by how giving Robin and Larry both are of their time. Like if you think about how many businesses and touch points they're both involved in, yet they are so deeply involved in the WNBL and the success of this league, and so passionate about it, that it is just fantastic. And I really enjoy working with both of them.
And we've had some massive news in Brisbane the last couple of days in regards to potential stadiums being built, infrastructure. We've got 2032. It's sort of like, this is our, even though it might have been 1,300 days late or whatever it might be, this is our moment now to shine. We've got 7 years to get things going. How important is the games in the back of your mind in terms of basketball? I mean, the Opals, we've got re-signed Sandy Brondello, I see before, which has been she's been on the podcast before. And how important is that sort of masterpiece, or to actually for some of these people to aspire to now?
Yeah, I mean, the WNBL is the breeding ground for the Opals, and that is proven by the history, right? And so it's absolutely essential that if we want to see the Opals succeed, the WNBL needs to be successful. Like, we need to keep being able to deliver that elite level of skill in the league. And so, looking ahead to LA, looking ahead to Brisbane, it's absolutely important because we know those players are going to come from our league.
Yep. And then in regards to the operational capacity of WNBL versus the NBL, are you going to potentially see some sponsors wanting to be part of both? Is it sort of is it a separate thing, or how are you going to see that in terms of the commercial revenue, I suppose, from a team level and also from a league level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we're in an amazing space because we can take some of the learnings and the wins from the NBL and learn off of those and take the ones that we essentially want to take while also building our own thing, right? And so it's important for us to think about, we are our own league. We're not the NBL plus one. We are our own league, and therefore, what are our values? What are our goals? And who are the right commercial sponsors and partners to come in and be a part of that? So there's not a simple solution that's just okay, well, let's take everything that's done in the NBL and expand it to the WNBL. That's not our strategy, and it's also not what I think would be best for the league. And so, we are definitely looking at ourselves as an independent league while also being able to absolutely learn and build off of some of the wins and relationships from the NBL.
Yep, and in terms of the grassroots programs with young girls playing basketball, you mentioned there might be a slight problem in terms of court shortages and ref shortages. I mean, how does the WNBL get involved in that, I suppose, and being present and saying, hey, come to the games. It's a great day out. It's a wonderful time to come and support your great players, but also, if you're really good, here's a pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was going to say. I think it's really important for those young athletes to understand what the opportunities and the pathways can be for them. And so the more that they get exposed to the WNBL, I think the better. I would love to work more and really dive into the community level. I think we have a lot of opportunity there. I don't think it's been fully capitalized on yet. And I think we can absolutely do a better job at connecting the dots between the community level and the league level for all the reasons you just said, making sure those young athletes understand and see the opportunities that lie ahead of them. But then also that's important when you think about the future of basketball in Australia and you think about the future of, the WNBL and the Opals and what that looks like.
And Jenny, the importance of technology. We're growing in a world of AI at the fastest pace ever, and we've got all sorts of sports tech companies, we've got software companies, etc. How important is to get stakeholders and people to say, hey, we can improve this, we can improve fan engagement. There's tools we can test, and you're at a league from scratch, right? So maybe you can test and learn pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's important that people aren't afraid of change, right? Like if we want to continue to grow the league, we have to continue to develop. And so there can't be an emotional reaction that's just like, oh, this is going to be different. Like their change can be scary a little bit, but at the same time, you have to embrace it if you want to continue to grow and develop. And AI, for me personally, I'm super passionate about that space. My mind is continuously blown every single day. It's so hard to keep up with because new things develop overnight. But I think the sports space specifically is doing some incredibly amazing things. I was in a meeting towards the end of last week, and then they followed up with just some examples of all this customized technology that they had done with sports leagues in the US, like Major League Baseball and some NBA teams and other things. And like, I literally felt like my brain was exploding from that one email because the opportunities are endless. And of course, most of us, I would say, have been using AI in our daily lives for a while, and I'm continuously incorporating that in my daily life more and in my professional life as well. And when it comes to just time efficiency, right, and things you can do with it. But I think, again, in the sports space specifically, the opportunities are absolutely incredible. And it's not to implement change just to implement change. It's to implement change to help us grow and develop and make us function more efficiently. If you could have a world where like you're using AI to look faster at, like fouls or things like that, or like replays. And imagine how much faster the game would go and what that would look like.
Yeah, no, it's moving so fast that sometimes I interview some guests and I actually don't know whether it's them or whether it's a clone of themselves, right? So you might have to prove yourself, right? That's what we might have to do in the future. I think there's a little bit of a tech around that. But just on that point that you mentioned around changes to the game, we've seen cricket evolve from a test match 5-day game to a 2020, a 3-hour smash out that sells out with music and dancing and whatnot. We've seen the NRL has got things like the NRLW as well, got the State of Origin, which is a product of once a year, which is different to the mainstream, which again is very popular. Basketball, are we going to see some evolution of the game, some sort of like maybe a byproduct and or a rule change that might actually, change a little bit of fandom, I suppose, in terms of entertainment levels?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, making sure we're delivering an awesome game day experience for fans is super important, right? And so we'll continue to build on that and just try to improve it all the time. I think as far as like other events or things or ideas, like absolutely, will we get there in year one? Like probably not. We have a lot of other work to do just to kind of get the league going in this first year, but we're absolutely thinking about things for the future.
And in terms of thinking about things for the future, one thing that comes to mind would be where the teams are. And you've already got an existing teams. And here in Brisbane, I think it's 1998 that there hasn't been a team, which was the year that I left high school. And I remember Sandy playing for Brisbane as well. The thoughts around the league, national vision, geography, you probably can't say too much now, but I'm sort of interested to hear the thinking process.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are committed to just keeping the league to 8 teams in this first season. Again, there's a short runway for us taking over our ownership just a few months before the first season gets off the ground. So we're committed to 8 teams for this first year. Absolutely looking at expansion for the following year and then the years to come. I think you always have to be careful with balancing the timing of that expansion along with being able to maintain and stack those teams with that same level of elite skill. And, we saw this happen in the WNBA a few times. If you go back to like the 90s and the early 2000s, where they scaled so quickly that then they had to scale back, right? Because that's exactly what happened. The quality of the game declined. And then they slowly started to scale again in recent years. And so you do have to balance that. But we have so much interest from around the country. It's been super exciting to see, even just emails come through with people that really want to start a team wherever. And so we have a lot of interest, which is really great. And we have to look at each one of those expressions of interest carefully and make sure that not only are they interested, but like, can they actually run a business? Because we want to make sure we're not starting teams that then disappear a year later. Like, we want to build financially sustainable and well-run teams for the future so that they're still here 5 years later.
Jennie, one of the questions I asked the athletes, and you're my second CEO that's come on. The first was the CEO of the National Pickleball League, which is seeing some growth as well as grassroots level, as well as basketball. But in terms of your high performance mindset, why did you get the job? Why are you at the level that you're at that someone else is not, do you think? What's one of your greatest strengths?
I think passion. I think that I definitely approach things with a level of passion and determination. Like, I think it comes from, again, being an athlete where I'm competitive and I want to win, right? So, like, I don't want this league to fail. Like, we've got to make this thing win. And so I will throw every ounce of me into this role to make sure that the WNBL succeeds, because that's just the way my personality is. And the flip side of that is I'm not the kind of person that takes a job for a title or just the job or a salary, because I am really passionate. Like, I've got to believe in what I'm doing, and I have to believe in what the product is and what the business is trying to do. And so that is really important to me. And so I think, again, there's a lot of similarities there between what you bring to the table as an athlete, like teamwork, hard work, determination, like, diving into everything like full-fledged, and that competitive nature as well that helps you actually succeed in business. And that's why you see so much crossover between people who have played sports at an elite level and leadership and executive roles in sports. I mean, well, not just in sports, but in business as a whole.
Where do you reckon the competitive edges come from you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, well, first of all, I'm a Leo, and Leos are known for being super competitive.
The star sign says it, so yes. I'm a Cancer. I don't know is a Cancer bad? I don't know.
I think, I don't know, maybe growing up in a household where like I had a single mom, I had a sister, we were very much like pretty much raised ourselves. Like, we didn't have a lot of money. Like, you were hustling from day one. It was like, you were just like that independence and that determination and hard work and all of those things, like all of those values were instilled in you at a really early age. And then I think when you combine that with sports and the training you get when you start playing sports at a really early age, then those kind of mix in together. And I think that competitive nature with that like grit and determination and like natural born hustle kind of comes through,
Were you someone that was a very hard taskmaster on yourself, that if something went wrong, you sort of beat yourself up a bit? Or were you like one of those people that went, nah, let's keep going?
Probably a little bit of both. Like, it depends what it is. I still do this. I still play sports. And like, if I make a mistake in a game, instead of focusing on the wins, I will go home and think about the mistake I made in that game for like 5 days before then somehow other people go home and go, oh yeah, I made that mistake, but then I did these 5 amazing things. Like, my brain would be focused on the one bad thing that I did. So I think there's a touch of that. But I think as you get older, like at least in the professional sense, that inner monologue kind of changes, because I don't think you can succeed in business if you let that inner monologue take you over. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Are you a goal setter?
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
And how is it? Short, medium, long, or all of the above? Or
all of the above. I'm also an extreme list taker, where every day, like every morning, I make a list of like, here are the absolute things I need to get through today. Here are some that would be great to get through. Here are other ones I need to do, but like, doesn't matter if they get pushed. Well, matters, but okay if you push it another day. But then at the end of the day, I make another list again, because, and sometimes it doesn't change much depending on how your day went.
It gets moved across on the Kanban to in progress. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like goal setter, extreme list taker, live and die by like Google Calendar and like calendar invites. Like, if it's not my calendar, it doesn't exist.
The same with me. So you're very structured, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What about resilient? You call yourself a resilient person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, that's a combination of chapters in your book, right? Even going back to childhood, like things that happen that you learn from and just grow from. I am a firm believer that, and I know it's cliche to say it, but like everything happens for a reason. I really do think that. Like you can't look back on something and go, oh, well, 10 years ago, if only X, Y, and Z, no, that you can't do that. You can't change history. So instead, I think you have to think about, well, why did that happen? Like, what did I learn from it? What can I learn from it? And like grow from there. So I think that resilience definitely comes. I'm also one of those kinds of people that like wants to learn from everything, so if I make a mistake or or there's a big challenge, I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to learn from that, and how can I like personally grow from that?
And when you watch sport, is there a particular team, back to your grassroots, that you love watching? Is there a sport you love watching, and are you a raging fan, or are you just a quiet sort of soak it in fan?
I am such a passionate sports fan. I will say the only sport, like living in Australia this time for 13 years, previously for 4 years, so almost all of 20 years I've been here, I still can't watch cricket.
Right. Not even the 2020 format, not even the smaller...
I can't do it. I can't get into it. Everything else, I'm like, absolutely so easy. And I love a good sports documentary. I will watch a sports documentary on any sport. So I would watch a cricket documentary, but I can't. I've been to cricket tests like in person. It's fun to go to a match in person. Cannot watch it on TV. I will fall asleep. You will
fall asleep. It is the sound of summer sometimes in Australia. Yeah. The test match in the back. Now, I'm going to get to a scoreboard moment, which is something which I ask my guests around a moment in life which maybe has defined them, or maybe that they remember that changed the trajectory of their life. Jennie, what's your scoreboard moment?
I actually, this image plays in my head quite often because it was such a sliding doors moment for me. If you remember that movie, Sliding Doors.
I sure do. Yep. Gwyneth Paltrow, wasn't it?
Yeah, there you go. Gwyneth Paltrow. And, I think everybody has these sliding door moments. And for me, this is my second time living in Australia. And the first time I came here was 2003. And I was living from New York City. I was living in California at the time. I had been in California for about 3 years. Never really loved living there. Like, did it great, had friends there, but didn't really love living in California. And I always had this weird thing about Australia. Like, I had never visited here. I don't know why. I just had this thing about going to Australia. And so I decided to quit my job, and I had a one-way ticket to Australia. And I remember I got on the plane and I just like looked out the window. It was United Airlines, I remember. And I remember sitting in the window seat and looking out the window, and it was like a movie where I was just like, it was a nice sunny day. And I was just thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, like I've just dropped everything. Like I dropped everything. I'm going to this country. I did not know one person in Australia. And it was just such a moment where it was like, okay, either this is going to work and then who knows what's going to come from it, or it's not going to work. And in however many weeks, I'm going to be on another plane back to New York City, moving in with my parents, like trying to figure this out. Right. And I think it was just a monumental sliding doors moment where then I got to Australia for the first time, and obviously I landed a job and ended up staying for 4 years that time. And I remember one of my best friends from high school said to me, she had found a list that we made when we were 16 years old. And it said 25 things we wanted to do before we died. And I wrote mine on one side and she wrote hers on the other side. And on my list, it said, live in Australia for at least 6 months. Wow. And I didn't even remember that. And she sent it to me when I had moved here and said, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. So I think it was just, there it is. That's my scoreboard moment.
That is one of the best moments. And tying back to your youth as well. When you arrived in Australia, what were some Australian isms that you just like going, huh? What? I don't get.
Some of the sayings, like I remember I was at this meeting at work. I was working on the Today Show at Channel 9 at the time. And so, you work as producers on that show, you work in shifts, right? So there's people that come in really early in the morning and then leave in the afternoon, people that come in mid-afternoon at like 2:00 and work to 11 or midnight, and then people who work overnight. So I was on the late afternoon shift, and you'd always have someone come in and do a handover where they'd kind of tell you what's been happening through the day, what's going on. And so this woman I worked with came in, and also everyone spoke so quickly that I was like, I just wanted to be like, slow down. I can't understand what you're saying. It was like the accent wasn't a problem, but it was like the speed of talk. So she was speaking really quickly, and she said, oh my God, Jen, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Is that good or bad?
It's all over the shop. You're like, what does that mean? Oh, that's all right. Don't worry, I'll shout at the bar. You're like, what did you shout at the bar?
Yeah.
And how did you go with AFL?
AFL was a little bit tricky to understand in the beginning, but then it made sense. I think I'd latched on to rugby the quickest because I'm a huge NFL fan, and like the rules were kind of simple to follow, made sense to me with that like footballish kind of background. So that was probably what I latched on to the quickest. But look, like as I said, I love all sports, so it was pretty easy.
Jets or Giants?
Oh my God, Giants always.
Always, yeah. You would have, yeah.
A terrible season we've been having. My 14-year-old, we were in New York City together in December, just the two of us. So of course, got to do ice hockey, NFL, basketball, all the sports as always. And he goes, "Mom, you do realize that the Giants have sucked my entire life." And I was like, "That's not possible. Like you just turned 4, you're turning 14. Like,
I think they won it in 12, didn't they? Or 11? Yeah.
No, he was right. The last time that they did really well was 13 years ago. So it basically is his whole life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember they won because I had a friend in New York and they were going crazy at the time. But got some friends that are Jets fans. Jennie, I'm going to have one more question for you. Now, if we're going to repeat this podcast in, say, 3 years' time, right, where do you want the league to be and where do you want you to be and where do you want women's basketball to be in Australia?
I hope that the league is at a place where we are seeing kids, parents of all genders, all walks of life out there wearing jerseys and merch from the women's team. I would absolutely love to see that. I think any women's sport, it's not often right now that you see people walking around in women's jerseys, and I would love to see more support in that way. And I think that's a great sign if we can get there in 3 years of the levels that we've been able to take the league and the clubs and the players. What were the next two?
No, I was just saying, so the question was, 3 years' time. And then one piece of advice for the general public to buy into the WNBL. How do we start? How do we get involved? How do we, you want the general public to be part of it. Where do we start?
The best way to show your support for any women's sport, but I will talk about the WNBL, buy a ticket. Come see it. The tickets for the WNBL, the price point is super low. Like you can catch a game for $5, $10, $15. It's a really low price point. It is super family friendly. It's a really fun event to take the kids to. There's music pumping, the kids can dance. There's like the players all stay and sign autographs and take photos after the game. They're really great with that. They're really giving of their time. So I guarantee you the fun. But the best way that you can support the sport is to buy a ticket to a game.
That's some great advice. We're going to leave it there. Jennie, thank you so much for being part of the Scoreboard podcast, telling your story, telling the background of the WNBL, the new ownership group, the exciting initiatives that will come, the Watch This Space for women's basketball in Australia, the appointment of Lauren Jackson, which is amazing. I wish you all the best for your progress and looking forward to catching up.
Thanks, Chris.